Look, I just want to follow up from what Lewis was saying, and just to say it's just a good to see Lewis again, because on the picket lines with him on the McDonnell's dispute, he's been absolutely inspirational. It's been really good to have him there talking to young people about what his experiences are, but also I think giving them courage as well, to stand up to. So thanks, Lewis, for all you're doing, and thanks to Baker's Union for taking that campaign up. But the only reason I'm here, excuse me, is because I think this is one of the most important campaigns that we can get behind now in this coming period. And for a whole series of reasons. I'll just tell you my experiences in my constituency and what's been happening on the ground, because to be honest, I've been worried sick sometimes about what's been happening. We've had lots of people during the COVID crisis who've literally had to choose between, even when they're not well, or even when they're living in a family accommodation where someone needs to be self-isolating, they've had to choose between actually either taking time out to care for a relative or to care for themselves if they're sick, or go to work or face hardship. And it's been horrendous. And people should never be put in that situation. It's, we're supposed to have some respect for basic human rights. Well, I think it's a basic human right that when you're sick that you're cared for, but also that you're capable of looking after yourself as well and not fall into poverty and in some instances destitution. I tell you, the other thing that's come out of it as well is the physical sickness is actually then related to the stress and the mental health problems we're seeing. I know we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, but I actually think we've got a mental health pandemic at the moment because of the stress that people are put under. And it's all that thing about I'm under pressure to go to work. If I don't go to work, I won't be paid. Or don't go to work, I'll even be threatened with the sack, that sort of thing. And so people force themselves in. Often in my constituency, they force themselves onto public transport as well. And as a result of that, if they're not well, they're putting other people at risk. So no wonder it's no wonder we've had a massive increase in these last few days in the number of cases, and tragically an increase in the number of deaths as well, because the government is forcing people into a situation where people are vulnerable, but then they also make others vulnerable. And there's only one solution to that, is making sure that when someone is sick or they have to isolate, they're not financially penalised for that. Because that's what this is. If not giving people the right level of sick pay or access to sick pay is penalising people for being sick. That's what this is about, and we've got to get that across. And it's all well and good for some people who may well have large amounts of money in the bank and it doesn't bother them, they don't need it, they can fall back on their reserves. Most people in this country haven't got those reserves. You look at some of the surveys that have been done, just how little people have got by way of money in the bank, for example, that they could fall back upon. So being sick or having to self-isolate within our society at the moment, our economy at the moment, means you're very quickly up against financial hardship. But in addition to that, you're then also you put your health at risk, and we know with COVID you're putting your life at risk as well. So I think this is absolutely critically important campaign. I think it's one of the foundation stones of where we go from here in terms of our campaign in the trade union movement overall. So this launch tonight is absolutely critical. If we can't get this right, we won't be able to tackle COVID properly. And we also, in addition to that, we won't be able to protect our people. I've just come from a Unison meeting, and I've been doing it because we've got the election for the General Secretary in Unison at the moment. I've been working with supporting Paul Holmes, and at a lot of those meetings, people are raising this issue of what's happening in public services, in care homes, the NHS, etc., when people feel unwell and the pressure that they're put under to stay at work. But as Lewis has said, it's right the way across the economy. It's not just public services, right the way across the economy. And then what happens as well is when people stand up, they then get victimised, particularly the trade union rep. So I think this campaign is at the seeds of one of the deep injustices with our society. And exactly as Lewis said, they'll tell us, we can't afford it, and that sort of thing. When they need to prop up businesses to maintain their profits, they find the money. They create the resources, they create the money. But, not having the resources was one of the arguments they put up about having any form of leave, holidays, sick pay, sickness leave, or whatever. And it's one of the arguments that was put up actually when people want to abolish slavery. We can never afford it. Of course we can. And what we've got to be able to do now is, I think, highlight that this is one of the central demands of the labour and trade union movement in this current period. And we've got now the opportunity, and I'll be quiet in a minute, but just the opportunities of these. In this next couple of weeks, we've got the Labour Party conference. I know it's online, it's not the same conference or whatever, and we won't be able to pass resolutions or policy or whatever, but we can do both on the fringe meetings, the World Transform meetings and others, but also if we can, in some of those online discussions, we can raise this as a central demand that we want the Labour Party to take up as key to the platform this coming months. That's the first thing. But before that, we've got the TUC. Ian Hodgson and others who've crafted the resolutions going up to the TUC. We've got to get the TUC behind this campaign solidly. And it's got to be, I think, one of the platforms the TUC, the point you made, Nadia, one of the platforms that the TUC can use for recruitment. Because if people see us standing up for this, they'll join the union because we'll become the voice at work to protect them when they're not well and when they need to take time out as well to look after others. So I actually do think this is a central campaign. I'm glad it's been raised. It's brilliant that people have come together and identified it as one. I'll do everything I possibly can. We'll have parliamentary interventions and try and see what we can do, put pressure on the government. The key thing for us, though, is get the movement mobilised. And in that way, we can create a climate of opinion where actually it becomes almost common sense. I actually think this government is now getting desperate about COVID as well. And they can go two ways. They can continue to force people into work and unsafe conditions, or that they can see sense and recognise actually people need support when they can't work or shouldn't be working. And the only way you can do that is give them proper financial support. And I think we can win the argument amongst the general public. And I think we can mobilise a climate of opinion, even with this government, to force some action. So I'm well behind this, Nadia, and I'll do everything I possibly can, including making sure I get access to Zoom meetings right.